No, someone who hasn't asked a question. Go ahead.
So you really photograph that many times in London?
300 times a day, at minimum, on average. Yeah. I mean, you sound like you might have hailed from
I
the
hail
United
from
Kingdom.
there.
Have you spent much time in London lately?
No.
Play count the CCTVs the next time you're back. It's pretty amazing. It's literally, so I live in an industrial road in East London with no other residential. We actually have 6 tiny little ex-council cottages on a terrace on the roof of a building. So we have a walk-up. Our whole neighborhood was bomb flat in the Blitz. So they had 6 little cottages left, and they wanted to build an office building there, and the freeholder made them rebuild the cottages on the roof. So there's no other residential. It's all industrial. There's I have the Metropolitan Police Forensics Lab downstairs, and across the road is Satellite House, so it's all satellite uplinks and stuff. Nothing happens on our street. It's about 100 yards long, but I counted the cameras once between one end of the road and the other, and there's about 20 cameras.
Really?
Yeah.
It's just, I remember seeing them on the roads, but that
Everywhere.
when I read it,
Well, keep in mind that every time you enter or leave the congestion zone now in
Absolutely.
London, your license plate is photographed. Every time you board the tube, in fact, several times on the way into and out of the tube, you'll be photographed. Several times on and off a bus, you'll be photographed. They've replaced the old route masters that had a second conductor who walked around with the new route master that's safer in a lot of ways. It doesn't have, the old double-decker buses in London had a staircase that went upstairs, and at the bottom of the staircase was an open section that led out onto the road. So if you fell down the staircase, you would actually roll out of the bus and onto the road. But people didn't, except when they did, right? And they've now replaced those. They no longer have a second conductor walking around. What they have instead is a series of cameras, right? So there's not just a camera, there are cameras, plural, on every London route master. So yeah, absolutely. You're certainly photographed 300 times a day in London at least. It's pretty shocking. One more question, then I'll start the reading. Yeah?
What are you reading right now?
What am I reading? I'm doing research for a book about China and India and video games and labor. It's a novelization of my short story, Anda's Game. It's about union organizers who use video games to reach into special economic zones in the developing world. It's a kid's book about economics and union politics. And so right now, I'm reading this memoir called Socialism is Great, a worker's memoir of the new China by Lijia Shan. I picked it up in Seattle earlier this week. And it's a really good book. It's a memoir about a woman who, when she was 16, her mother said, "You're dropping out of university and going to work at the factory." And she said, no, I want to grow up to be a journalist. And her mother said, "Forget it. You're going to work at the factory. The family needs you to earn a living. Your father was victimized in the Cultural Revolution, and so he can't contribute to the family. He has to live somewhere else, so you need to go and do this job." And she nevertheless found a way to get tertiary education, and then watched as the factory that she worked in, which made intercontinental ballistic missiles, was retooled as an export commercial goods factory as economic liberalization took place. And she observed it with this very keen eye. And the climax of the book is that she's commissioned to build or she's part of a team that retools the factory to build giant Buddhas, right? So from making missiles to Buddhas for export. And so it's a fascinating account of the reindustrialization of China. I'm really enjoying it. All right, so I'm going to read a little from the book. This book, Little Brother, it's my first young adult novel, and it's about young people in the Bay Area who discover after terrorists attack San Francisco and blow up the Bay Bridge that there's actually worse things than a terrorist attack. You know, the terrorist attack is over when the dust settles, but the immuno-response that follows a terrorist attack when the police come in and in order to keep you safe start systematically taking away your liberties and surveilling you is actually something that lasts and lasts. It's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. It's security herpes or something. So they decide that they're going to take their city back, and they do so by taking control of their technology and by taking control of the dialogue, by getting better at discussing the statistics of rare occurrences, which something that I think we have a really bad intuition about. We tend to think that rare things happen a lot. Like, we get off the plane in Las Vegas and we look at all those casinos and we think, boy, there's got to be a lot of money to be made. Look at those giant casinos. Those guys are rich, as opposed to, holy moly, it must be nearly impossible to win. Otherwise, they couldn't have built those big casinos, right? And then, we rather than getting back on the plane, we lose everything and they build another casino in our honor, using our savings. So we tend to focus a lot on what happens on rare things that happen on, instead of the everyday occurrence of children being abused by their family members and by close friends of their family and authority figures, we focus on children being abused by strangers, which does happen, but so statistically rarely that it's hardly ever happens, as opposed to the nearly universal experience of children being threatened or abused by people who are in their lives. And when we divert resource from the thing that almost never happens to the thing that happens, or from the thing that happens all the time to the thing that never happens, we end up being a little less safe because we're not devoting our energy to addressing the thing that most people are at risk from. So they take control of the dialogue, and then they try to take control of the politics by getting involved in electoral politics, because there's never been a lasting political change that didn't involve a legislative change as well. You might be able to convince the mayor or the Congress or the Senate that your idea is a good one and that your cause is just, but there'll be a new mayor or a new Congress or a new Senate or a new president or a new mayor along any day now. And if you want that person to stick to the changes that the last one committed to, it needs to be enshrined in law. So that's the three things that I try to impart to young people in the book, is the importance of taking control of your technology, taking control of your understanding of the statistics of rare events, and taking control of electoral politics. And not taking control in the sense of Diebold and their voting machines, but taking control in the sense of knocking on doors and ringing bells. So I'm going to read to you a little bit from a section in which the protagonist, a kid named Marcus,